grew up in Johannesburg during apartheid. I voted for the first African president as well in 1994. So I kind of come from a legacy of politics and the urban context. So the kind of focus of my education product has always been about kind of politics, economics, social kind of agendas and stuff like that. So I'm going to just go to straight present now so that you see my screen. Sure, no, I don't want to do that. Sorry, hang on. Why is it not opening? Okay, so as Hussein said, I co-founded this organization called Architecture Sans Frontières, which is without borders, and I co-founded this in 2004 with some friends of mine and some allies and contacts who are all kind of doing masters and PhDs at the time. And so the talk I'm going to give today just will mostly talk about this organization specifically and our aims and our vision. I'm going to explain specifically about one of the programs that we've developed, which is called Change by Design. And there'll be a short film that I'm going to kind of show as well, which has been made by one of our partner organizations in Freetown in Sierra Leone. And I'm going to talk very, very briefly about the other 3 programs that this organization runs. So starting off with what is Architecture Sans Frontières? Why is it not moving? Oh, into the talk, hang on, sorry. Beg your pardon. Right. So talking about the organization itself, we're a member group, or we're a member of the Architecture Sans Frontières International Network, which is a network of about 30 or so organizations, and it changes each year depending on who's paid their membership fees. But in this network of organizations, we are unique because we focus on learning, which has always been our objective since we founded the organization. And as I said in the beginning, this came about because all of the initial volunteers were either kind of academics doing masters, doing their PhDs, or were actually kind of currently teaching in the academic field. And then there were a couple of us who were practitioners as well, kind of interested in trying to kind of create an organization which would foster change within kind of vulnerable communities. So because we had so many masters kind of students and practitioners, the kind of method at the time for teaching people how to learn in kind of these kind of contexts was to immerse us in kind of 2-week workshops in the field. And that kind of became our initial method of engagement when we first started. And so we kind of used to run these international workshops every year, trying to kind of find partner organizations within the field with whom we could operate and work. And then we kind of invited about 20 to 35 international participants. And I guess that the point with that is because of the nature of the initial kind of way we started this organization, our organization is always focused on learning as a kind of main objective of what we do. But over the years, we've really come to kind of criticize our own objectives as potentially slightly colonialist and continually kind of reinforcing the kind of wealth, sort of the kind of education of a wealthier group of people who have access to education, being able to access these kind of workshops, and therefore kind of perpetuating a cycle of aid and not necessarily building the capacity of our local organizations as much as we wanted to. So slowly the focus of our organization has moved away from just about capacity building of built environment professionals, but more towards kind of supporting the urban professionals within the context in which we work, but also the organizations with whom we partner. So that's become a really, really important thing for us as we've sort of evolved over the last sort of 16 years, I think. I don't know if many of you have ever set up organizations, but when we set this up, my husband and I were the initial co-founders along with some other people, and my husband said, okay, we'll give you 6 months and then it'll be set up and it'll be fine. And we're 16 years later, and we've only could have been the last 2 years really kind of consolidated this theory of change, which is on the slide at the moment. And I think we must have changed our tagline or our goal at least 50 times in the years that we've been working on this. And this is our current objective, which is very blue sky thinking, kind of socially produced equitable cities. It's kind of a really bold kind of objective, and that's kind of what we aim to achieve throughout the work we do. And to achieve that, we have these 3 different kind of intermediate outcomes, which we kind of measure ourselves against, whether we're actually achieving these or not. And that would be increased influence on policy decisions. So about the resource distribution within the context in which we work, improved knowledge and understanding of participatory and sustainable urban development, and that's particularly with sort of built environment practitioners. So you're kind of working at policy level, you're working with the built environment practitioners within the context in which we're operating, but then also kind of enhancing the capacity of the local organizations with whom we're working to then kind of meet alongside the other 2 outcomes and finally hopefully achieve a socially produced equitable city. The kind of work that we do to achieve that is kind of advocacy work. So we do research, publications, events, and continually questioning different kind of networks and things like that to try and achieve that. We do, obviously, like I said, the capacity building and the learning through the workshops and the kind of work that we do on ongoing work that we do. And recently, the kind of more socio-technical support has come about in terms of actually supporting our local partnerships. And then the things that have enabled us to do that over the years have been a really kind of interdisciplinary team of dedicated volunteers, without whom we would not have been able to achieve what we have achieved. We are developing stronger and stronger partnerships with the community groups with whom we're working, and therefore developing longer term kind of relationships with them to kind of make sustained change. We have a big network of active members, so who kind of come in and drop in and out when we require them to do and achieve different things that we're working on at the time. And then obviously we have a really strong track record now of kind of doing really good work over the years that we've been working. So what's really important for us is we approach design not as the end product of what we do, but as a method of engagement and collective inquiry. And we articulate our work through the different programmatic areas that we've developed over the years, and each have a specific focus of inquiry. So the change by design focuses on participatory design as a means to deepen democracy in cities. The resilience by design focuses on questions of vulnerability, disaster risk reduction, and disaster response. Then we've got the inclusion by design, which is our newest program, and this emerged in response to questions of migration, diversity, and inclusion in cities. And challenging practice, which captures the learning from our other programs and disseminates knowledge and skills to other professionals. So as I said in the introduction, this is the focus of this talk is the change by design method that we've developed over the last 16 years. But it kind of started in 2009 with our first workshop that we ran in Brazil. The aims of the program include exploring participatory design and planning as tools for advancing social justice and deepening public participation in urban decision-making processes. And our initiatives are grounded in strategic partnerships with local stakeholders and utilize design and planning to support vulnerable and marginalized urban groups so that they can affect change in the cities where they live. It's evolved over the 10 years, as I said, through collaborative initiatives in Salvador, Quito, Nairobi, Cape Town, Freetown, and London. Initially, our terms of agreement were based on the 2-week workshop format, which I mentioned earlier, and this was adapted from the field trip format of the masters at both Oxford Brookes University and the Development Planning Unit, which is at the UCL. The intention was always to support learning and action of international participants and, depending on the partnership agreement, develop an output through the workshop that the partner organization could use in whatever capacity they required. There's a strong focus on informal settlements upgrading, although the scope has more recently expanded to look at issues of housing and urban regeneration in London. In recent times, we've put together, we've started to put greater emphasis on building long-term partnerships and developing more complex layered initiatives, and that's specifically happening in London, Cape Town, and Freetown. So throughout its history, the program has evolved in dialogue with the theory and practice of participatory design for informal settlement upgrading. And this has obviously been enabled by the people who are volunteering on our program, because many of them are masters or doing PhDs or currently teaching in these programs. So therefore there is an objective to kind of improve their practice and their learning and their kind of outputs from their kind of focus. But there have been 4 key tensions that have emerged in engaging with these debates. And Alex Frediani, who teaches at the University of Central London in the DPU program, has written a paper called Reimagining Participatory Design. And I've just kind of paraphrased some of the comments from that paper. So firstly, we realized the practices of participatory design have either focused more on the physical production of participation, often reducing participation to mere processes of consultation, so asking people whether they like something or not, for instance, or they prioritize the consolidation of community organizations or social mobilization, but this is always at the expense of kind of developing a spatial product. So there's these kind of tensions in terms of what the outcome is. The second tension has been the challenge for participatory design to engage with issues of social diversity and asymmetries of power. Efforts focused on diversity often create initiatives that target people from certain labeled vulnerable identities rather than challenging the relations that cause exploitation. It could be argued that this is because the challenge is imposed both by complex sets of social relations shaped by various asymmetries of power and by donors' demand for measurable and product-driven outputs in short timeframes for activities. The third tension has to do with the issue of scale. Although participatory design practitioners recognize the need to engage in more nuanced ways with the relationship between localities and citywide processes, only a few examples reveal actual engagement with such issues beyond the discourse of replicability. Citywide thinking, when introduced in processes of participatory design, often merely sets the scene of context, and we rarely see such processes taking a more propositional position in addressing citywide and structural concerns. Often, participatory design initiatives based on a problem-solving approach have focused too much on the easier-to-solve short-term urban conflicts while failing to take on the underlying issues causing inequalities and injustices in cities. Participatory engagements motivated by the long-term battle of challenging the drivers of social injustices in the city encounter the challenges of reconciling that struggle with meeting the immediate needs of the poor, leaving such needs unaddressed in the short term. The fourth term in practice of participatory design concerns issues of time. When incrementalism is included in participatory plans, it is within predefined concerns of what can and should be the end product. Therefore, the practice of participation is bounded by the length of the project cycle. In this context, the challenge of participatory design has been to produce spaces that are adaptable and open-ended, unleashing alternatives that respond to changing needs and aspirations over time. Participatory design methodologies have rarely been able to incorporate such preoccupations in practice. So with these four tensions in mind, we've developed a methodology that aims to experiment with the kind of practice of participatory design. And it centers on or engages with the tradition of community action planning, sort of developed and coined by Nabil Hamdi along with other practitioners. The methodology has two key features. It has a strong focus on thinking about space across the different scales. So we've got the personal scale, the dwelling, the household, the community, right up to the city. And the second is the methodology emphasizes design as a means to explore and articulate a diverse set of possibilities to achieve change. So we don't necessarily develop one set of design ideas, but a portfolio of options, rather than to define one plan or one way forward. So we try to kind of address the issues of these kind of very complex, vulnerable kind of communities and the diversity of the people within those kind of communities. So here we've got the overall framework which we've developed. The key elements include the stages of work along the top of the diagram and the components that the work or investigation is made up of. So I'm just going to explain this very quickly. The methodology is structured into the 4 stages. You've got diagnosis, dreaming, developing, and defining. The first 2 stages are explicitly articulated around 3 scales of design. So we look at the dwelling, the community, and the city, but we have the one cross-cutting theme for all of those 3 scales, and that's the policy and planning scale. I'm just going to read these definitions quickly. So the dwelling interrogates housing as a system of settings based on relationships and activities that altogether shape local residents' diverse experiences and understandings of home. The community scale engages with the neighborhood, focusing on community dynamics as they relate to shared spaces, streets, open spaces, community halls, and infrastructure, which include water, sanitation, waste, and energy. The city scale is concerned with the urban dimension of participatory design and planning, connecting the experiences of local residents with the experiences of those living in other localities and with wider urban dynamics. And then the cross-scale focus on policy and planning allows to explore the conditions and relationships needed to mainstream participation in the making of the city. A key feature of all change by design processes is the use of visual and spatial tools for engagement, such as photos, drawings, models, and maps. Working at these different scales, the diagnosis stage assesses the current situation and analyzes local realities and urban trends, while the dreaming stage involves conversations about the future of an area and uncovers the needs, aspirations, and imaginaries of residents. As part of the methodology, the findings of scale-based activities are brought together as a set of principles for the future of the area and a range of options for each theme of development, for instance, housing, basic services, or infrastructure. Principles and options are used in a participatory visioning exercise, which we call the portfolio of options, which aims to produce guidelines for the future of the area. The principles are used to guide negotiations in the exercise, which brings together the difficult scales, the different scales, which are dwelling, community, and city. On this slide, you can see the work that we did in Freetown in 2017. So on the right-hand side is the work which was done in the field with the kind of community members and the local organization with whom we were working. And on the left is the synthesized set of principles for the participatory neighborhood planning, which would be the next stage of the kind of exercise. But the portfolio of options exercise is a collaborative action planning exercise, and the exact type of exercise varies depending on the nature of the partnership and of our engagement with the place. So this is in Quito in 2013, and this one's in Cape Town in 2015. But it's important to recognize that the exercise was focused on exploring possibilities for the future and discussing trade-offs between different pathways to changing an area. Based on the findings from the portfolio of options, the defining stage focuses on concrete plans for action and urban design and planning guidelines. At this stage, we generate tools for strategic collective action. The type of tool or output again varies depending on the nature of the partnership and of our engagement. So for instance, in Freetown recently, our core focus has been the development of community action area plans, a novel planning tool for the upgrading of Freetown's informal settlements in the city. A CAAP is a live document co-produced by residents of a settlement with technical support from other urban actors, utilizing participatory design and planning methods to provide a framework for change in the area at different scales. However, the final outputs of our workshops and initiatives are not always community action plans. For instance, in Cape Town in 2018, together with our local partners Development Action Group, we were working with a network of small-scale private developers who wanted to expand their houses to build affordable housing units. As part of the workshop, we generated a tool for engagement that DAG could utilize in the future to discuss with individual developers how their planned expansion would meet design and planning standards and also address the needs of the broader neighborhood community where their property was located. So the framework is intended to enable us and our partners to gain an understanding of the process of engagement, allowing for fluidity and freedom to adapt timescales and amount of engagement according to the needs. I'm just going to show a quick video, which was created by our partner organization in Freetown. It was a pilot one-week workshop, which we ran in 2017 with the partner organization called SLURG. And we were just testing whether the change by design methodology could be adopted to develop these community action plans. So I'm just going to push play. And hopefully it's loud enough.
In August 2017, staff from Architects Without Borders UK came to Freetown, Sierra Leone to run a participatory planning and design workshop in conjunction with the Sierra Leone Urban Research Center, the Development Planning Unit, which is a department of the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment of University College London, and Njala University.
Sorry, Melissa, I think we don't see the video itself.
You don't see the video? Okay. Let me just change that, sorry. Thank you for letting me know.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Which used the ASF UK chain by design methodology was to explore how planning can bring about inclusive city making. Workshop attendees were split into 3 groups, each aiming to understand planning at a different scale: home, neighborhood, and city. Morning preparation sessions were held at the SLURG office, before traveling to Kokobe, an informal settlement in the city, and the workshops area of focus. The week was split into 4 stages: diagnosing, dreaming, developing, and defining. The diagnosing stage was aimed at understanding the current situation in Kokobe, focusing on the problems that residents experience, as well as the potential and opportunities for change. Working in the SLOC office allowed the teams to familiarize themselves with maps of Kokobe and decide on 4 categories of neighborhood features to be mapped: economic, social, environmental, and physical. After traveling to the site and meeting the residents for the first time, the work began. For some participants, this involved walking around Kokobe in small groups, getting to know the area, and mapping out specific features and visiting residents' homes. Others focused on working with maps of the city. The dreaming stage was an opportunity for the community to think about changes they would most like to see in their homes, neighborhood, and city. The 2 areas in Kokobe with the highest concentration of points of interest from the previous day's mapping exercise were selected to be the focus point going forward, with groups instructed to think about what should happen in these selected spaces. This was undertaken in order to reveal aspirations and hopes for improvement in the area, and how inclusive urban development might better respond to the needs of local residents. At the end of the session, members from each group shared their collective dreams for the 2 sites.
So this other side, now inside we want to make a bridge there because school there around there. So if bridge there, the people will be well protected. And not only any space, and not only any kind of people wooden bridge, now and down there.
The development stage was concerned with assessing and improving a number of potential planning and design options before deciding on the best course of action. Multiple options were needed as there are many different routes to achieving aspirations and dreams. After morning preparations in the office, the team traveled to Kokobe for the final time. This day saw the teams working in their groups at different skills, taking the outputs from the previous day's dreaming session and assessing stakeholders, timeframes, cost, and potential beneficiaries. Each group presented their plans, identifying themes and ideas that were common to all and discussing how next steps could be inclusively decided.
6 months ago for this project, the community.
The final day was devoted to the defining stage. This initially saw groups have their final meetings as they defined 5 points that were required for a more inclusive Freetown at their specific scale. Participants from the different groups then worked together to consolidate their findings from across the 3 scales. Members from each scale explained what they have been working on to other groups, and then identified common themes and discussed priorities for action, revealing the challenges and opportunities for implementing future action. As a final act, the entire group worked together to produce a manifesto, including conditions that they felt were necessary to move towards an inclusive Freetown through participatory neighborhood planning. The staff of SLOC, ASF UK, the DPU, and Njala University wants to thank everyone who took part in this workshop.
Okay, let me just stop presenting that one. So just to finish off, can you all hear me still? Okay, so we did carry on. It was a really successful workshop, and it did prove to be the community action group that we were working with SLURC, that this could be a way to develop these community action plans for all the different areas within Freetown specifically. And so we got funding to continue to work with them over, I think it's a three-year period. So what is going on? Full screen mode. This was from February this year, when two of our volunteers went out to Freetown again to work with the SLURC group and the community to develop a further community action plan. And I think the idea is that we'll be continuing to work with them for the next year to try and help them and support them in this ongoing work. And just going to quickly look at the three other programmatic areas that we have within Architecture Sans Frontières as well. So we've got resilience by design, and at the moment this program is in the reflection and development stage, because I think that we've had a few volunteers burn out, and I think we're trying to kind of consolidate what we'd like to achieve with this program and work towards a kind of more progressive way of interpreting the kind of learning that we've done so far into a kind of new way of operating and working within these contexts. And typically with all our programs, we want to work with local partners, developing strong partnership relationships and have longer term kind of impact, rather than just working on 2-week workshops or kind of developing project building design proposals, which is not our intention as an organization. Then we've got this new program, which is literally just started at the beginning of 2020, and we got some funding to continue to do this project alongside a bunch of other partner organizations. And in January, the first workshop was run with ASF Associates, University of Sheffield, which has now become the University of the London Met, has taken responsibility for that, and also the Politecnico in Milan. And we're kind of co-creating a course to sort of support urban inclusion, and that also has to be able to be kind of taken by people who are not necessarily built environment practitioners, but actually communities of migrants and people who might not have the skills necessarily to kind of draw or develop design proposals for their own kind of existence within the urban context. So it's kind of a really interesting project that they're working on, and that's ongoing at the moment. But because of COVID, a lot of the kind of traveling to and from different cities has had to be put on hold. And then the last of our 4 programs is called Challenging Practice, which was a European Commission funding project which we developed in 2012 alongside a bunch of ASFs to kind of create an online learning platform to kind of support development practitioners or architects and urban practitioners to work within this context. And it includes 4 stages. So as part of the funded program, we developed the first stage, which is the introductory stage, which is a series of 10 modules which can be read and studied online. And then there's the further 3 stages, which are learning in action, reflecting in action, and reflecting on action. And it's really interesting to kind of reflect on this program now, because it's an important part of ASF's practice, because we can use a lot of the case studies that we develop in the field with our partner organizations, and then bring back the learning into this platform to support people who are learning from all sorts of walks of life globally, to be able to then work within their own context in their own particular way. And then the last kind of little bit of information I wanted to share was this website that we set up. So if people are looking to work within communities and kind of develop something along the lines of what's been discussed as this framework of change, but design framework these are all the tools we use when we're in the field. And we've got them on a website which is accessible. It's called asfparticipate.org. And any one of those tools, you can click on the link. It takes you to what that toolkit, what that method actually is. And then there's a downloadable PDF, which takes you through the steps that you would need to go through to be able to achieve that. And each of these colors is then developed in terms of a kind of when you would do them within the kind of timeline of engagement with the community. So I mean, as I hope it's clear from the presentation, we're kind of continuing to evolve and think and rethink and question and critique our own practice and really try to engage in the ideas about what participatory design practice is. But we've never built anything. So the question that often comes up is, have any of our action plans been kind of built out yet? And that's still an ongoing project that we'd love to achieve, but have not yet achieved yet. I hope you found this interesting, and that's me.